Poker stresses me out. I don't know if it stresses you out, but I really feel like our lives would be easier in this quest to get really good at this game. That's why you're all here. If we didn't care so much about certain things that are out with our control, if we could learn to accept what poker is and what it does to us, what it has done to us in the past, what it will do to us in the future, if we'd learn to manage our expectations for every session that we play, every day, every week, every month, I really think we would have such a more pleasant time playing this game. Today is all about acceptance. I've got 5 points that I'm going to show you today while I play a session of 200 Zoom live, off the cuff. We'll see what comes up, we'll wing it. And these 5 points are things that if we can learn to accept, not only will our game improve and our poker journey will improve, but our very enjoyment of the game and our absorption within the good parts of the game should grow, and we can minimize a lot of this horrible noise, the hum of poker turbulence that goes on in the background and is always eating away at our focus and our enjoyment of this game. So let's get started. Let's meet these 5 things that we can learn to accept in poker to improve our experience. Someone in our Discord server posted this graph, guys, and they actually posted it as part of, I guess, a complaining post, a kind of seeking for help post about a downswing that they'd been in. They posted this graph first to say this is how things were going. I was feeling really good about my game. I was up 1,200 big blinds. I felt like I was crushing the competition. I was really killing people over these 12,000 hands, and I was really confident in my game. But then this happened. Over the next 6,000 to 7,000 hands, the poker player ran terribly. They lost 16 buy-ins. You can lose 16 buy-ins over 6k hands, 7k hands if you run bad. It's happened to me many, many times in my career. It's happened to pretty much everybody I've taught multiple times as well. You shouldn't go through this all the time. This shouldn't be your constant loss rate, but this can happen. Had the student not built himself up so much at this point, had the student not felt like this was hard-earned progress, that he was killing it, that his game was really strong, I don't think the student would have felt as bad when this happened. While we do want to accept that downswings are inevitable, that's actually going to be point 2. But point 1, just before we get into the session, I want to talk about upswings. Let me actually read you a bit about what the student said here. The student started the post. I'll just read the post actually, because I think it's an extremely honest, heartfelt, basically outpour of what it means to be doing well and perceiving success and then suddenly being on a catastrophic downswing of 16 buy-ins. The student says this: when it rains it pours. A moderate downswing has turned into by far the worst downswing of my open brackets, admittedly short close brackets poker career. I have dusted off all of the profits that I made since coming back from hiatus after my last downswing. That's the one that you see on your screen right now. I was feeling really confident about my game before this, and that would be this graph here before the downswing struck. I'm not sure what is going wrong. I have not consciously changed anything about my strategy. And looking through my stats, the only major change I can find is a drop in my check raise flop stat. I know my winning sample was small, but I really feel like I'm miles ahead of most players in my pool. The average VPIP PFR 3-bet is 31-14-5, he goes on to say. Was I just running like a god for 12k hands? And I'm really no better than the limp call under the gun mouth breathers who pervade my pool? Am I just having a terrible 7,000 hand downswing? I need some advice on how to handle this. Should I take a break from playing and focus on studying? Should I take a little break from poker altogether? I'm not going to name who this person is. You can see that they've hidden their screen name on the graph as well, but I will respond to them in this YouTube video. And I will say this. Firstly, when you were running really well, when this was happening to you, yes, you were running extraordinarily well. You don't run at 9.55 BB per 100 near the start of your career. Usually, maybe you do in a really soft pool long term, but it'd be highly unlikely for that to be anything like your true win rate. So if you ever win at something like 9 or 10 BB per 100 these days, unless you're playing like live or something like that, where you play 10 hands an hour, so it doesn't really matter anyway. Online, you know, it's going to be because you're running good. When you win 12 buy-ins without too much of a hiccup over a short space of time, it's going to be because you're running good. And no, I'm not referring to the all-in EV line. That's not that important. There are many other ways that you can run good and bad that you're not seeing expressed in this graph. You know, how many sets you flopped, how many times they had a straight when you had a set, and about 10,000 other things are not shown by any weird pink lines or brown lines or anything like that. This yellow line, we can kind of ignore it. But the point is that you are running really good when you win over this kind of sample. And so feeling like a lot of confidence when you're winning, although it's natural to think, okay, I've put in a load of work, I'm now getting good results and I feel confident in what I'm doing, so you attribute one to the other. It's actually an important skill to understand that point number 1 of this video, of this acceptance video, accept that upswings are not your doing. Upswings are not your doing. Upswings are just as much variance as downswings are. If you're a winning player in the long run, what will happen is that your upswings will be slightly more severe than your downswings are. You will be up and down, but gradually the graph's going to go up, like long term. But what we really have to avoid is this idea that when we're running good, it's because of our own merits, because of our own strength as a poker player, and it demonstrates our growth. And when we're running bad, it's either a confidence crisis or it's a sign that it's just all variance's fault. The truth is very much something in between, but the student phrases this in a very black and white way, and this is super common. Am I actually no better than the mouth breathers at my pool? I mean, poor mouth breathers, you know, give them a little bit of respect here. Yeah, they're doing their best. Humans like you are, mate. Humans like you. It's not the case that you're no better than them. Probably you are better than them. Are you better than them enough to win after rake? I don't know. That remains to be seen, but should you have taken the first 12,500 hands of success as actual evidence that you are a strong winning player in your pool that can beat the pool badly enough to still be winning by 6 or 7 BB after rake? Absolutely not. There's zero evidence for that. In fact, it's very unlikely that that's the case if you're a newish poker player. So yeah, tip number 1, as depressing as it may be, is that upswings are not validation for your poker prowess. If anything, they are the calm before the storm. They are something that's lulling you into 2 traps. Firstly, let me jump into the session here, get some tables on the go as we do this. The 2 traps that you get from that are firstly, this kind of built up confidence that you maybe, I don't want to say don't deserve because that's a little bit harsh. You should try to be confident, but it's not actually connected to your results in the way that you think it is when you're running good. And to think, I have worked really hard for this 12 buy-ins by playing and studying and doing my best and focusing and playing well and not tilting, is actually a huge trap, because what that does is it sets you up to believe that you have built something through your own hard work. And when variance comes and wipes that out and takes it away from you again, that's going to be pretty painful. I'm going to call ace queen suited here. It's a bit too good to 4-bet, even in these positions. 4-betting either for value or as a bluff. So getting that validation is actually just flimsy. It's not real. What actually matters is that you have been playing well, that you have been putting in the work, not the 12 buy-ins you happened to get when you thought you were doing those things. Not that at all, right? What the hell kind of probe strategy do I want to play on this turn? I think I want to play, I could play blocks. How good are people at checking back here? Do I know this player? These are the things that are going through my head. The answer is no and no. I'm going to start with a check here. I think I want to have diamonds and hearts a little bit more than spades here, though it's not a massive consideration. I have the task of figuring out how far down my range I am on this node, and I think pretty far down actually. And we could take a few different actions with this hand now. We do have king queen. That's really the only other hand king queen suited, so I think ace queen is a forced bluff on this node. I'm going to go ahead and overbet with the logic that I think this range is probably a bit too capped. I have 9s, 6s, 8s, jacks, all in my range, 12 combos of sets. Checking over pairs twice is something that people aren't too good at. 10's okay, that's not a bad call at all because most of my bluffs contain a queen, not a 10. So he's going to unblock my bluffs fairly well there, and I think he does have to defend that hand. But yeah, I think 10's is actually going to be underrepresented in that range. I think people are going to bet it too often on the flop and the turn combined, and so we'll reach the river with way too much stuff like ace king, ace queen, etc. So that's really the function of the overbet on the river, is to try to garner maximum elasticity, effectively just try to enter a situation where the pool, especially the weaker side of it, and I don't know who villain is folding disproportionately often to that line and to that sizing. Back to the acceptance part of it. What else should we strive to accept in order to make peace with poker and make poker more rewarding and make success more achievable and to not go insane? So the second thing I want to talk about is downswings, as promised. Downswings are inevitable. You really can't get away from the fact that they're going to happen to you. We like to live in a world where downswings won't happen, you know. We'd love to say that at worst we're going to lose like 5 or 6 buy-ins, and consciously we know that to be nonsense. This is a very interesting raise size. If you're using a sizing like this, you should probably just be raising 8-6 plus and then bluffs. I mean, you can do that, you can build a sizing around that, and your subconscious will actually pretend at times that the world is such that you can only lose a certain amount of money. Even though consciously you've seen people go on 30 buy-in downswings, your subconscious will kind of say that won't happen to me. In the same way that we don't go around thinking we're going to get hit by a bus or something like that, our brain is not conditioned to expect really bad acute variance like losing 30 buy-ins, so the real life equivalent of that would be horrific. And we're not conditioned or wired to expect that, not whatsoever. And so when it happens, it feels awful because we've not actually fully emotionally and subconsciously accepted that possibility. You are not your conscious mind. Your conscious mind is your audible rhetoric. It's what you hear. It's the voice that comes on when you're like problem solving or thinking about something explicitly, especially something objective that's not directly linked to your emotions. That's like what you hear, right? But that's not your brain. Your brain is so much more than that. It's all of these lizard brain, reptilian brain processes that reside at the back of your skull, and they tend to fire whether you like it or not. And they use things like dopamine reward circuits and all of this stuff to get things done within your brain, to motivate you to do things quickly and basically to help you survive better. I'm going to go ahead and play small bets on this flop. I'm going to check this time. And so in order to actually understand that downswings can happen to that extent, we may need to visualize it. Sometimes I say to students, okay, at the start of your next session, why don't you go ahead and actually imagine losing 8 buy-ins today? What would that feel like? Because that could well happen. And when it does happen to you, you want to be a little bit prepared. You want to be a little bit aware that that could happen. So we have no spade, we do have a jack, which seems like a fairly okay blocker here. I'd imagine this is a difficult spot for people to avoid overfolding. The sizing I want to pick here, probably I meant to have a spade to overbet or something. Probably not actually in this spot, but in many spots like this, you're going to need a spade to overbet river. But I think this is a mandatory bluff against pool. What really matters there is the true EV of my bluff, and I think after check call turn, they're just not going to have enough flushes in that node compared to GTO. So I think overbet is going to be totally fine, regardless of what your solvers say. I don't think that's a spot where we need to get really obsessed with the strict doctrine of like have a spade blocker for the overbet but not for the B75 or anything like that. Freedom is a wonderful thing. Take it from me as a Scot, you know, as a Scottish, someone whose country battled for freedom. So if you can get on board with the idea that downswings are going to happen to you, you'll survive much better. Just like imagine, this is not a happy metaphor, but imagine you had a bad disease, right, or illness or condition. Let's say you suffered from something like MS or motor neuron disease, or maybe something not quite so bad, but something that was still kind of affecting your quality of life. And you had accepted that you had that for years and you were fully aware of the effects it had on your life and you'd began to take steps to manage it mentally, physically. Your quality of life, ostensibly depending on what the condition is, could probably be okay. It might be fine for you, okay? It's not objectively as good as it was before you had this condition, but because you've acclimatized to suffering this condition, you still get through life with a relatively reasonable amount of happiness, let's say. But that, I would imagine, I'm lucky enough not to have a condition like this at this point in my life, but I would imagine that all of that requires a fair amount of acceptance. You have to move through the pain into the acceptance. And the thing with downswings and poker players is I don't feel that really happens. I feel that when they run bad, they fight against it, they lash out, they post graphs, they complain, lament, seek advice, take breaks, run away from the game, play tilted sessions, move up stakes, move down stakes, start playing only 2NL. All of these things are natural human flight reactions to downswings. I don't think people ever really truly accept that that's just what's happened to them and make peace with it. Because if we could do that more, it wouldn't hurt so much the next time. And pros do this a bit better than amateurs. The post I read you at the start, the guy had not been playing poker for very long. Gonna range check, 6-6-7 rainbow. Not a board I want to do a whole lot of anything on. And on the turn, I think ace queen is going to have some defend against a good reg. I think this is a good reg. It's a reg that frequents this game, so I'm inferring. Against this sizing, is it a pure call? I don't think so. I think it's probably still a mix. I'm going to call 60% of the time here. I think that's about right. There's no way that like naked overcards like ace queen, ace king can just be folds here. And on the river, against the sizing, villain saying like I have a 7, I have a 9. He bets quite quickly as well. I mean, I think we just, based on that timing, I'm just going to call. The thing is, like that hand is probably a mix, but people who snap bet that river, okay, at 8s that time, good for him. Just an obvious play, obvious sizing for that hand. But sometimes when the river runs out in an extreme way like that, it kind of causes you pause for thought when you have a value bet to consider how good your hand is, what your sizing is, that kind of thing. So I think on balance, I don't know the player and I don't want to get too exploitative against these kind of like good regs, but I do think on balance that timing with that line will be overbluffed. Especially after flop goes check check, I would imagine that's the case. It'll be different though to each individual. Some people will be really strong when they act instantly, others will be weak, but I think on balance that's the way it's going to go. Ace 10-9, can we ever check bottom set here? I don't know, I'm against the weaker player, so I'm not going to. I think pot growth is a bit more important. I am not supposed to overbet this turn. In theory, I don't think. However, I'm going to, because I think the amount of elasticity that villain has here is not going to be enough. And so I think like when they have an ace, when they have a flush, they will very often just be calling regardless. River's a little tricky. I mean, yes, flushes we beat. Ace 10, ace jack, we actually lose to. I think I'm going to go for something like pot here. Yeah, I'm going to go for this size of bet. I'm not going to jam. I think it would be too thin with this boat. Not like way too thin, but definitely like a bet. If we face jam, it's really disgusting. And our hand is probably going to sink down to the realms of bluff catcher. Fortunately, we don't. So that's a nice example of just picking a sizing on the turn that you're not theoretically meant to pick. But if you did, it probably wouldn't be horrific. But the solver likes to make you think it's horrific, right? Because it gives you like all of one color, none of the other color. It's like, whoa, it's so visually striking, you can't possibly overbet. But actually, you can. You do whatever the fuck you want. That's what you need to tell the solver and yourself. You just call down with ace-8. He calls down with literally this hand. He calls down with ace-8. So that's one reason why you want to overbet the turn. It doesn't start causing the fold equity from ace-x that it's meant to in reality. Because people are too inelastic, especially when their absolute hand strength is trips, right? They like trips. Accepting that downswings are inevitable is a huge thing. If we could get better at that, we'd get better at accepting poker for what it is, and we'd protect ourselves more against this turmoil that we all go through when we encounter a downswing. It's a bit like living with that condition. If you can condition yourself to accept that as the norm, you're going to get on way better in life than if you constantly fight against it and resist it for the rest of your life. Same with poker, but very few of us accept downswings or learn how to. Going to call jacks here to the 3-bet. Cutoff versus big blind. Against small blind, I would actually consider doing more 4-bet because the range is a bit more linear. Against this polarized range or more polarized range, I prefer call with this hand in this position. Of course, on button, I would begin 4-betting a bit. Point number 3. Accepting your daily task in poker, open brackets, it changes, close brackets. I'm reading my notepad here. 763, good board for range, want to bet often 60% globally. Let's say 70% with this hand, something like that. Going to be using small bets, of course, because villain is very pulled here to a few types of hands. 1, bigger overpairs than ours are going to check raises. 2, overcards are going to bluff check raises with backdoors, usually. And then they have a third category of hand, which is stuff like ace king, ace queen, that will usually check call, but sometimes check raise as well. So I expect to face raise here a lot when I face a continue. I also expect to face fold a lot. When villain calls, I think my hand is now very, very strong, theoretically. Because this is a player I don't have any real exploits again, I'm going to assume that it's strong in reality as well and bet turn jam river here. The frequency that they should show up with an overpair like kings or queens on this node is very low when they don't check raise the flop, so I am just going to pure bet the turn here. I think it's a pure action with such a vulnerable and strong hand. So your daily task in poker, it changes. What do I mean by this? Well, what I mean is that if poker hits you in the face with a brick, metaphorically speaking, by making you run like dog shit, then your task that day is to lose the minimum. I had a student go away for poker weekend. She likes to go to Vegas and plays these obscene amounts of volume over the space of like 3 days. Like basically sits at the poker table for like 10, 12 hours a day, but that's what she likes to do. Likes to grind it out in that way, each to their own. She ran bad in the last one. It was kind of like, how the hell do I make sense of the fact that I've just come all the way here just to play poker and I'm down X buy-ins because I've got kings in against aces 3 times pre, and it was like stuff like that was happening pre-flop, you know, to her. And I wrote back and I said, well, you have to understand that your job this trip is to lose. Your job for this trip, because poker is such a fucked up game, right? It's such a weird game. Your job is to go away to another city that you don't normally live in, pay for a hotel, dedicate yourself to playing a game with cards, little bits of cardboard that you like throw about and bits of plastic that you throw about. Isn't it weird when you break it down to what it really is? And your job is to lose that weekend, just to lose money, lose resource tokens that you could have bought food with and heated your home with. You have to go away and lose those things. It's so counterintuitive, but that's your job when the deck smacks you in the face, because over a decade, there'll be many times when the deck hits you in the face in a good way. There'll be times when poker just shits on you. There'll be equal amounts of each over the long, long, long haul, not necessarily just a couple of years, but like, 20 years of your career, maybe it'll even out, like enough to not matter. It'll still matter a bit, but yeah, leaving out a lot. And if you combust every time poker says your job is to lose the minimum, and you look at another reg who doesn't combust and actually loses the minimum and poker says his job is to lose the minimum, then you're gonna do way better if you can be that person that knows how to accept the role that you're being given. This is bigger than I would have made it, but I started typing in 9 and then I couldn't be bothered making it smaller, so gonna pure isolate against a weaker player open here. Guessing, maybe not, maybe it's a reg, but 3x, often gonna be a recreational player. I've got them tied blue. In before the chat's like, oh, Andre Poker is so good. He's better than you, bro. What are you talking about? Maybe he is. Maybe he is. So accepting your daily task is such an important thing. Weekly task, triply task, if you will. In the case of my student that went to Vegas for the weekend, sometimes you rock up in the morning and you're down 4 buy-ins in like 10 minutes. It's likely that your job for the rest of that session is to keep the lid on your frustration, play as well as you can. And here's the really motivating part. Play better than all the other regs would play if they were in your situation, because there'll be times when they get screwed by variants like that as well. I'm gonna just fold a 7. the presence of this weaker player is unappetizing for the line of 3-bet, so we're just going to ditch it. It's going to swing to negative. It's a break-even 3-bet, of course, in equilibrium, but we're going to just swing to folding. Okay, so that's number 3. Try to see that your task, financially speaking, at least like monetary outcome-wise, does change all the time when you're playing a poker session. When you're playing a poker month, some months your job is to really cash in on the good times and win 50 buy-ins. Other months your job is to break even if possible. Sometimes it's to lose 20 instead of 35 buy-ins. If we could all do that, how much better at cards would we be if we could lose 20 instead of 35 buy-ins when running bad? All right, point 4, accepting that your brain has irrelevant thoughts at the poker table. It really does. Like right now with this hand, I have a thought like, is this 30% or is it 40%? I don't care. Let's just do it a third of the time. Like, there we go. We rolled it. Who gives a shit? It's a bluff I'm going to use sometimes. It's the type of hand I throw into my 3-bet bluff range every now and then. I have no problem doing it. Some low frequency. Does it make any difference whether that frequency is 33 or 25 or 40? No, not actually. I mean, maybe if they're way off and I'm playing the same people all the time and they're running the HUD and I am over bluffing from this position overall, then perhaps like over like 50,000 hands against one player, it'll be noticeable. But this is just really nonsense. King 4 of hearts here. Let's go ahead and bet big. Let's just pure bet big this combo. I'm going to be using a very high frequency of large sizes on this flop. And we are going to bet this time with the King 4 of hearts. I don't have that many relevant thoughts compared to what I used to and compared to like some of my students and less experienced poker players compared to you guys probably, no offense. But you will have lots of thoughts like, if I fold this, I'm folding too much of my range. No one cares because the guy's under bluffing. If someone's under bluffing, it's irrelevant what GTO Wizard says. It's irrelevant how much of your range you're folding. It's irrelevant what MDF is. Irrelevant. Irrelevant thoughts aren't bad because they're wrong. They're actually not wrong. If the question was the right question, they would be a good answer to it. But if I said to you, what do you call that has the wig and the red nose that goes to kids' parties and tries to make children laugh? And you said hot dogs are one of the most popular foods at cinemas. You wouldn't be wrong, but it'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? What kind of answer is that to the question? So when poker is asking you, and it asks you the same question every time, which is the good thing. You guys probably know what that is. If you watch my content, that's right. It asks you, what's the highest EV play? That's all it's asking you. Okay, there's other things like when things are equal, you need to have a bit of balance in certain spots. Like for example, I'm mixing this King Jack. I don't know the frequency, so I do it 50-50. Who cares? Not important. It's a clown, by the way, was the answer to the first question, in case you were stumped. You have very irrelevant thoughts at the poker table. You have lots of them. People say things to me like, could we just bet the turn really small instead to stop that happening? That thing that happened at Showdown that we don't like. Could we bet the turn to stop him bluffing us on the river? Could we just raise to find out where we're at? There's so many thoughts that are irrelevant to your EV compared to the thoughts that are actually relevant that you shouldn't even be thinking them. But when you do, they lead you astray and also use up your mental resources for that spot. What do I expect to be happening in a spot that gets cold called here? I expect this player not to be checking enough overpair, probably. Oh, this is a cold call 3-way pot. Yeah, I'm just going to pure bet here. I think it's just better against like the range that people pragmatically build in this spot. Most people aren't checking enough here. Okay, interesting. 8.3 big blinds. I don't think this hand actually wants to call. I mean, against small blind, I'm petrified. I'm not going to lie. I think way too much of their range is pocket pairs, and I don't think people are going to raise like too much here. So they're not going to have hands to bluff with. We block bluffs. I could peel here in GTO. It probably wouldn't be horrible to peel here. I think in reality, this spot is dangerously under bluffed. Maybe not from this player, but I don't know the player well enough to trust them fully that they're bluffing enough there, so I'm going to fold. Again, it would be an irrelevant thought if I tried to pick out the GTO defense frequency there and was like, this hand must defend 28% of the time. That would be an irrelevant thought. It's possible that if I was cheating at poker, God forbid, and had RTA, real-time assistance, and had some solver running, and I copied it there, I would do worse than just playing the way I thought was right. So you have irrelevant thoughts to the poker table. Not all thoughts that aren't the direct question of what's highest EV are irrelevant. I'm not saying that, but many of them are. And it's really important to think about what is the most relevant thing to the situation at hand. And usually that thing is, what's the best line in EV terms? Fifthly, and finally, we want to accept that poker is very, very hard. The journey of poker, not just learning the game, not just technically, but the whole journey of starting off as a poker player to trying to achieve some goal, like winning at 200 Zoom on stars. That journey from start to finish is insanely difficult, takes a lot of time, the games improve in skill level as you improve. It's a nightmare, it's hard. Not only that, but there's also mental game struggles and hurdles to get through. You have to find a time to play, you have to keep your mood in line, you have to have a good study to play ratio, you have to find the right coach, the right community, you have to get the right content and avoid the sea of too much information. You have to know that Jack 9 of hearts is just a call and not a 3-bet here. Actually, you probably can 3-bet this. It's getting into that territory again. I'm talking nonsense. You can 3-bet this. There's certain hands here that are a bit too good to 3-bet. I think Jack 9 is okay to 3-bet though, so we'll do it low frequency. I think it's usually a call. But yeah, you get the point. Poker's hard. Like, I don't know the frequency of Jack 9 3-betting here. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just a call or it's a 3-bet. But poker's a hard game. It takes a long time to get really good at. And like, for example, when you first start, you may just bet this flop all the time. It's hard to know that check is something you should do here about half the time with this hand. I'm going to play small bets here when I bet. I'm going to bet this time. I don't have to bet. I can also check. You have to know why I'm playing small bets here, right? To understand the game well. I'm playing small bets because I believe that the polarization of my value betting range compared to that of my opponent's range that faces my bet is not sufficiently polarized for me to use a bigger bet when I build my range in this way. I don't know what one big blind is here. I guess he's just saying I have more 6-6. I don't want you to check back a lot. I challenge you to find the right raise frequency, and I'm never going to raise this hand. I will raise certain hands here. I don't think I'm ever going to raise a jack this bad. I think I just want to call, and I guess I pure call river with this hand. Guess he can range lead maybe for that sizing. He can lead a 4 as well, which is a bit annoying, because if he'd led bigger, he wouldn't have a lot of 4. That would just be a check. See, poker's hard. This spot's tough. I've never seen it before. I have never seen this spot before, and I've been playing poker for so many years. Yeah, I'm not gonna fold a jack here, but I'm not in love with this spot. Not folding a jack though, I believe. After the small lead, we're just still doing a bit too well in EV terms, calling with that combo. But yeah, you have to call, you have to lose sometimes. But you get the point, guys, right? It's a hard game. Why is this an acceptance thing? Because if you can accept that poker is really, really hard, you might give yourself a bit more of a break. You might not be so harsh on yourself when you make mistakes. You might not be so hard on yourself when a downswing affects you negatively and you tilt off a couple of buy-ins. Poker is a grueling test of a profession. It's so hard. All right, 5-4 suited. I think this is probably, let's call for the sake of the video, but you can call or fold here. It's really close. We'll just call because we're animals, so we want to play pots. That's the 5 things to recap. The 5 things that if we could accept would do us a massive, massive favor. To reiterate are as follows. 1, accepting that upswings are not your doing. So when you run good, it doesn't mean that you need to feel that you are now entitled to win at that rate, or that downswings can't happen to you. Your subconscious will play these games with you, it'll pretend that that's the case. 2, accept that downswings are inevitable if you can get used to living with downswings as a constant in your poker career. Like you'd get used to a debilitating medical condition, it would help you live with that condition. Downswings exist for everybody, they always will. There's no getting cured of downswings, so let's not hope for a cure. 3, accepting that your daily task, monetarily speaking, changes, your weekly task changes based on what part of variance you're currently in. If you go on a poker weekend trip, your job may be to lose only 10 buy-ins, lose only 10k if you're a 5-10 player. Other days it may be to win, 20 buy-ins in 2 weeks. 4, accepting that you have irrelevant thoughts. If you can accept that, you've got a way better chance of curing yourself of them, identifying them. When do your thoughts not have that much to do with EV, and what are you going to do about it? And 5thly and finally, accepting that poker is very, very hard. This will just help you see every step of the way that you're not meant to just snap succeed at this game, that you're not meant to just breeze through poker like it's learning a really simple skill, because it's not. I think all of these things together, if you can get them right, are going to make a massive difference. And working more on acceptance, you can do things like meditation outside of poker as well, just to help you get a bit better at this. I don't know this player. I know this hand's going to bet really frequently, so I'm just going to bet this hand. I prefer betting these weak, flimsy hands against recreational players. This is a spot I'd never overbet when I'm bluffing, especially. I wouldn't overbet the spot anyway, but especially not when I'm bluffing. I can bet, I can check here. I don't think it really matters. Is ace turnover folded on this node? No, I don't believe so. Yeah, I'm actually just going to roll this. I don't have a preference this time. I'm going to use this sizing when I do bet. And yeah, I think just getting better at being zen in general about the whole serenity prayer thing. I'm not a religious man, but one thing I like from religion, I guess it comes from religion originally. I'm not here to discuss religion. Please don't discuss that in the comments. It's outside the jurisdiction of this video. But the serenity prayer, it basically says, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the conviction to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I think that's really cool, like separating things in poker between the camps of what I can and can't control and working heavily on what you can control. I think this is just so key. These are, again, like all of my lists I give you in these YouTube videos, these 5 things are not exhaustive. I do hope that they've helped you become more aware of things that you do need to accept ultimately, and that if you can accept, your journey will be a lot more peaceful, a lot more focused, more zen, and more enjoyable, and hopefully the path to success will be a shorter one. thank you guys. You know what to do if you like the content. Check out carrotcorner.com. Click the top link in the description for the Carrot Poker School. I will see you guys on the next video. Much love and bye for now.